You're listening to the Final Say Radio Show, a Rappaport Media production, with your host Brett Rappaport and co-host John Rappaport.
It's great to have David Pietrusza joining us, our good friend, wonderful author, great historian. David, welcome back to the Final Say Radio Show.
Oh, great to be back.
But today's it's a great day for me in history, but it's a very interesting day in history because it's not only the day that the Civil War started, but it's also the unfortunate, untimely passing of President FDR, and of course Harry Truman was sworn in to take over in the middle of the country being in war. So historically, with regards to war, it's an interesting day. And it also happens to be a day that we launched our first rocket into space, but also space shuttle. A lot of other things happen on this day as well, but just an interesting day for me.
Well, there's certainly a lot of interesting stories that go with that. I know, talking about launching rockets, one of the things that folks can do when they're in Grand Central Station is look up at the ceiling, and there's a lot of things there. One is that the constellations in the sky is actually backwards. There was a slight mistakes were made in painting it, and then the painter said, well, that's God's view of the sky. But there is a little hole in the ceiling there, and that is when the Eisenhower administration brought one of those Redstone rockets or whatever they had up into Grand Central to show the American people, or at least the American people in Grand Central, that we really did have a space program compared to Sputnik. And the problem is that it was just slightly too big to fit in Grand Central, so the pointy part had to go through the roof of that.
That's very interesting. We, looking historically, not just today, but as I'm looking through the recent, I guess call it the agenda, if you will, of this president, we see the push for immigration policy. We see the push for gun legislation. We see a push for new types of energy regulation against old types of energy, fossil fuels, if you will, a lot of other types of things. So I'm always interested because you've written so many wonderful books on different campaigns throughout election periods, whether it be the 1920 or 1948, 1960, which is right on my desk right now, and some of the other things that you've researched. Is this presidency and the social type of programs and things that he is putting forth, are these new ideas? Is this a new type of progressivism, or is it just a relaunch of past ideas just happens to be reoccurring?
Well, it builds on ideas which have been floating around for quite a while, but which were not able to obtain traction with the general public and the media until now. And we see that as he is willing to exploit certain things and to be on a 24/7, 365 days a year campaign mode, that the pressure builds on these things, and you see whether it's Senator Rubio peeling off on immigration or Senator Toomey peeling off on gun control or Senator Portman on gay marriage, that the Republican Party in many cases lacks the nerve to combat a lot of these initiatives. And then we see reports now that John Boehner may not be willing to push things forward or to let things go the proper way in the House. So you have a lot of problems with that. Speaking about old ideas and such, one of the things about immigration is, yes, it is indeed a problem when you have illegal immigration. You also have a problem when you may have too many people coming in, which can be assimilated all at once. That's entirely another issue. But I think the question of legality trumps all. But I came across a fact the other day, August 17th, 1932. And on that occasion, the Secretary of Labor, a fellow named Doak, announced that more people, and it was by quite a wide margin, had emigrated from the United States of America than had come into the United States of America. That tells you how bad the economy was then. And we have seen some shadows of that with the immigration, legal and illegal, from Mexico slowing down substantially during this administration, not because of any diligence on the border, but simply because, sadly enough, vis-a-vis Mexico and the rest of the world, America is no longer so demonstrably such a wonderful and better place.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, it definitely is. That's a very good point. John and I were speaking earlier. I know he's going to want to jump into this, but we were talking about the idea is that if we were to ask you, David, or ask anyone else and say, what would you list as the most critical issues facing not just the United States, but people around the world, what are the most critical to our national security and things of that nature, things that we can't really handle on our own? And I would think like right now would be Iran, pursuit of a nuclear bomb, North Korea with all their threats against not just us, but our friends and neighbors in Asia and other parts of the world, terrorism, disease. I mean, there are a lot of other things that seem to me that are more of a problem right now than immigration.
Well, yeah, what we're seeing is an almost total concentration on domestic issues, although not so much a concentration on the issue of fixing the economy, but all these side issues, distractions really, gun control, gay marriage, things which are really not the big issue, which in fact Obama was elected on, which was the economy, and then the deficit, which is going to further drag down the economy. But yes, the North Korean thing is incredibly worrisome. And you have the president talking about gun violence or something. Well, I would say that gun violence is going to be nothing compared to the violence which could be visited upon this country or upon its allies by this maniac regime in North Korea. And yet we see no great focusing on this issue by the public, let alone Iran. You see some statements by the new Secretary of State Kerry that this behavior on North Korea's part is not going to be tolerated. Well, we've heard that song before, and so have the North Koreans, and so have the Iranians, and I think they merely laugh.
Well, first off, David, you already answered one of my questions, with the guns. Well, I was actually going to ask you about the guns, right? But I wanted to take a slightly different tack on this. If you think about the idea of what a president is supposed to do, and I understand the president is a president for the people, but in the historical terms, it seems to me that just like running a business, you can't do 1,000 things. You can't even do 100 things, right? That's why you have departments. That's why you have governors, et cetera. So if you made a list of the 5 absolutely critical things, and then you think about what those are, and I think even if you ask most Democratic people, even if most people who, let's say, even support him, and you made a list, what are the 5 major crises that need to be addressed in this country, then, and I don't know if you have a computer in front of you, but if you do, go to whitehouse.gov, the president's mouthpiece, right? You know, the president's way of telling you what's the most important. And a giant billboard on the top, David, says, now is the time to do something about gun violence. And as you said, really? We're being threatened. Tokyo was just threatened with obliteration today.
Right.
How are we? And then we have something about a science project about the brain, immigration, and so forth. And of course, the little note about opening the doors to the White House, and that the president's committed to having the most participatory administration in history, which must have something to do with everybody getting free food stamps. I'm not sure what he means by participation.
I don't know, open doors. They don't even have tours anymore, unless you are a donor.
Yes. Lincoln bedroom's always for sale.
Right.
Oh, wait, I saw something else in the news today. Hold on, but while you guys mention that. You can't tour the White House because of the sequester, but the UN's budget has gone up the amount that the U.S. is funding, at least.
Well, you see all those numbers and all the ways to play with it, and it is absurd. And also, frankly, the entire idea of the sequester being some onerous burden, which we cannot do without. I mean, any administration, any business person, any administrator worth his salt would be able to figure out where that old saw, the waste, fraud, and abuse could be cut across the board. Or you see the story in the New York Times last night about how some more progressive members of the Democratic Party are afraid of the president's message on what we're going to do about spending and such. And of course he wants to increase the revenue, as they say, by taxing the rich. I think you can increase the revenue more by growing the economy, but that doesn't seem to be a priority as we've established. But, will we do something about entitlement? Yes, but at the same time, there are proposals in the president's package for more spending. Could we at least stop the process, settle in, make the programs that we have work a little better, cost a little less, before we go off and spend more money on bogus infrastructure projects or actually anything? I think the American people would welcome a freeze. We used to talk about a nuclear freeze, or some people did. Just freeze the federal spending level, see what happens for a few years, and try to get our fiscal house in order simply by that. If you want across the board, if you want a grand bargain, at least put that on the table. But no one is going to put that on the table because I think we are not governed by serious people anymore.
So, David, I'm not sure this is a perfectly fair comparison in history because the world is so much more real-time interconnected. But would you say that there's, or does anybody come to mind historically that you would say it did great harm to the country because perhaps they spent too much time trying to focus on smaller, less significant or distraction, as you call them, issues, as opposed to addressing the real threats to either the nation's economy or, as in this case, maybe to the nation's actual physical well-being when somebody's threatening with nuclear weapons? Is there a comparable analysis from a president in history?
Well, one might say, looking at it from the right, that Woodrow Wilson, while getting into one international crisis or having it forced upon him, one after another in 1915, 16, 17, really doesn't do anything in regard to preparedness. And that is one of the great criticisms of Teddy Roosevelt of him. I've been doing a great amount of research recently on the 1932 campaign and about the Depression as a whole, or the lead up to the New Deal. And you see that Herbert Hoover is remarkably distracted for the first year or so on the economy. And what is he distracted by? First off, he's had two initiatives of his own doing as he takes office, which distracts him. One, he's appointed a commission on the Prohibition Amendment, the 18th Amendment. So he gets bogged down in that, and that goes off. If FDR was kind of smart having a brain trust. He didn't have a brain commission. You appoint a commission, you're just asking for trouble. Then he also says, why don't we do something for the farmers? Because I'm not going to do a price control system as the progressives in the Midwest wanted. But why don't we have some tariff reform? And that opens the great Pandora's box, leads to Hawley Smooth. But also, at the same time, he's dealing with these issues. He's also dealing with the economic problems in Europe, which have to be dealt with. They are serious. FDR pretends that they really don't have any connection to the economic downturn. They do. But all of these things cause Hoover not to really deal with the economy in any sort of really energetic measures quite a while. And by that time, the economy is seriously damaged.
And isn't one of the most important things a president can do in the first place is instill a sense of confidence and stability in both here and abroad?
It certainly is, and that's one thing that Hoover was never able to do. FDR was, irrespective of his policies, as we may analyze them today and what their effects were. But even though he didn't progress in growing the economy to a sufficient thing until Pearl Harbor, people had more confidence. With Hoover, no confidence whatsoever. With Jimmy Carter, no confidence whatsoever. And part of that is it part of their mentality that they go in to micromanage things, that they lose the big picture, that they become down on themselves? You need a certain personality, like a Reagan, like a Franklin Roosevelt, who are able to project this confidence and so that people will believe in them. Obama projects that sort of cool, as Rush Limbaugh says, a sort of coldness, really. But he is constantly hammering, and he has taken Clinton's policy of triangulation and gone way beyond it, to where it's like he pretends he's not even part of the government. He's not part of the solution. He said the solution has to come from outside Washington. Well, he's in Washington, as far as we know, when he's not golfing in some government course in Virginia or Maryland or raising funds in New York City. But he's essentially running against Washington the whole time. And sometimes that historically has worked. Like I think Mayor Wagner was reelected in New York City, basically running against his entire administration. It's smart politics, but it's horrible government.
Yeah, well, sometimes I wonder when he talks about outside of Washington, is he referring to Chicago? Is he referring to the Kremlin? Is he referring to China? I'm not 100% sure where these
it's
coming
bad
from.
business. It's just bad business, and he will not sit down and seriously negotiate with anyone in the Congress. If you want to work with, if you want to, let's get it done. Well, if you are serious about getting it done, you sit down with John Boehner, you sit down with Mitch McConnell, and you say, well, I'll give you this, you give me that, whatever. You come up with something. You don't get anywhere by just shooting off your mouth in incredibly hostile and demagogic speeches at a distance from these people. This is not the way you're going to get anything done. And it indicates to me, I don't think he wants to get anything done. He much prefers the political issue, because so far it's worked.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think I'm not sure he intends to accomplish all that much more than beyond his namesake. But I would think that if he really wanted to achieve some of these goals, that he would, as you said, sit down with the people that would be necessary to accomplish them. But one thing I want to point out, I think that at this point, even a lot of the media that has been supportive of him all these years is starting to get frustrated.
Well, it is a frustrating thing. And of course, in the second term, there's a weariness with our leadership. We just sort of get bored with them, whether they're good, bad, or indifferent, liberal or Democrat. But since he's not running again, the liberal mainstream media doesn't have to cover for him anymore. They no longer have to say everything is absolutely wonderful, because there's less and less in it for them to say that. They can move on to other candidates. Unfortunately, they don't seem to have many other candidates at this point. The Republican Party, for all its weaknesses at this point, has a pretty strong bench. The Democratic Party has something which sort of looks like the expansion draft for the 1962 Mets. Hillary Clinton is sort of like Gil Hodges with one knee, I mean, not to make light of her physical infirmities, but they are getting worse and worse. And frankly, if she was such a hot stuff candidate, Barack Obama would not have been the nominee.
I have a great analogy for you, or you can compare it to this year's Mets outfield.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
David, one thing I would love to do with you sometime in a future segment would be because you've done a lot of historical look at past campaigns. I would love to take a look at the 2016 campaign with you sometime soon and try to throw out who we think from both parties may be some of the candidates in the primaries going for these positions, and try to forecast, if we could, some of the issues that will be the hottest issues and some of the people who will be the front runners, and also some of the people who may be not just in 2016 but in future races as well.
Well, that would be interesting. I hope we don't have more people on the stage for the Republicans in 2016 than we had in 2012. That was candidate overload.
I agree, and I hope none of them are named McCain, Dole, Romney, or anyone that has the same shared feelings.
Enough. Do we?
I don't know. It's getting frustrating. That's all I know. Anyway, David, it was a pleasure to have you join us today. It was great as always. Where could people, by the way, find out more about some of the things that you're working on, your books, besides Amazon, of course? And
well, my website, davidpietrusza.com. That's Pietrusza. But probably the easiest thing to do is just go to Amazon and start typing in like 1920 or 1920 or 1948 and see what comes up. Those are the titles of my electoral histories, and or even just Calvin Coolidge, because I've done a bit of work on him, including a new documentary biography, and that's very interesting too, to see how basically thanks to the efforts of Amity Schlaze, that Coolidge is back, and he gives us a model and someone to look up to, and goes even beyond Reagan, and that he not only cut taxes, he cut spending, balanced the budget, reduced the deficit.
Right, and I very much have enjoyed your Cal's Almanac that you sent me. I've used a lot of quotes in there and some speeches I've given, and I did just pick up the Calvin Coolidge book by Amity Schlaze, and I'm about to get into that as well. And so, thank you for that suggestion. Well,
we really should know more about our history, and conservatives have often been denied heroes and people to look up to. And Coolidge is, I think, a perfect role model for our time, in that he did what had to be done, and we've got even more to do.
All right. Well, again, David, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll speak with you soon.
Thank you.
Take care. That was David Pietrusza, the wonderful author of 1960, LBJ versus JFK versus Nixon, The Epic Campaign That Forged Three Presidents, and so many other good books. Please go to Amazon.com and check them out.